Hi, good evening, everyone. Hirsch Sar here, reporting from Auckland, New Zealand. So I'm not sure if I said that in my last video, but yes, as usual, reporting from Auckland, New Zealand. And today is Tuesday, the 9th of June, 2026. And yep, thank you for watching my video. Feel free to hit that like and subscribe button, and of course, post any comments you would like to post. So in this talk video, this is it might sound like a very, very simple concept, but it's one that really, really hit me. Should we instead work at night? And I'll come to detail it, and it's not really that simple. I remember we're now middle of 2026, June 2026, but I do remember working for a time as, believe it or not, an Uber delivery driver. Yes, I know, very stereotypical and Indian, especially with a Toyota hybrid to be an Uber driver, right? I did work as a passenger driver, and I even worked as a delivery driver. And as an Uber delivery driver, you would get notifications on your phone using the app. When a delivery was ready, you would go and pick up the delivery, from the eatery, and basically how it worked is that the customer would make the order in the time that the order is being made. The Uber driver goes and collects it. So theoretically, he's there by the time the order is made. He picks it up, and then as soon as possible, he then delivers it from the eatery to the person's home. So, it should all run pretty seamlessly. But I remember what was quite interesting, especially here in Auckland, New Zealand, when I worked as an Uber delivery driver. This was actually in the summer that's been. So this was October, November, December 2025. In the end, I actually moved on from the role, for my own reasons, and I wanted to move on to something a bit better. It's something I thought I would try out, but it didn't really, wasn't my cup of tea at the end of the day. But really, what I found so interesting, especially here in Auckland, New Zealand, I'm not sure if it's specific across different countries in the way that people order Uber Eats. They were usually Uber Eats, of course, but the peak hours, funnily enough, were actually very late at night. It would be sort of about 10 o'clock at night to about 5 o'clock in the morning. Believe it or not, 10 o'clock at night to 5 o'clock in the morning. And I was just wondering, why would those be the peak hours for people ordering Uber Eats or Uber delivery? Um, and I guess, I don't know, perhaps because during the day people just go to the eateries when they're open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then after hours when they're closed, people, I guess knowing my generation or the younger generation, up late at night watching Netflix or doing probably still on their phones when they probably shouldn't be. You have those late night cravings, midnight snack is kind of almost a fourth meal, if you like, but maybe that's why. But anyway, so I always used to wonder why that was, but those are the peak hours of it, and those are the hours that I worked. And I actually remember, like, I was working those hours more or less, 10 at night to 5 in the morning. And I remember coming back home and I finished the shift. You would see, especially in the summer here in New Zealand, as it was in those months, October, November, December, you would see the sun rise. So I remember seeing a lot of sunrises, and I was thinking, geez, I'm seeing a lot of sunrises in this job. When I finish this job and move on to the next job, I'll probably never see another sunrise, you know. But what it got me thinking was that, should we instead work at night? Now, what I mean by this, I don't mean that everyone should work at night, not everyone. But say if you take the workforce, the 100% of all people in the workforce, 100% that work, and of course, the vast majority of them will work during the day. And especially when in the summer, on hotter days, in the warmer months, with the climate changing and the earth warming overall, obviously it's becoming less and less desirable in some ways to work during the daytime when it can just be so hot, and especially when you're trapped in muggy weather or trapped inside a car and you're commuting from here to there, you're in the office with so many other people and it's just so hot, isn't it? And I remember thinking when I worked as an Uber Eats or Uber delivery driver, and especially when I worked at night, it was quiet, and in the warmer months, it was quite cool as well. And I was thinking, should we instead work at night? Now, again, not saying that everyone should work at night, but should we get about 20 to 30%, some of a significant portion, not all, not a huge portion, but a significant portion of the workforce, say 20 to 30% of people to work at night? And why I'm saying that is because it will alleviate traffic during the day, right? There'll be less traffic, there'll be less congestion. That would also decrease the amount of heat, especially in more, congested areas or crowded areas within city centers, within hubs. If there's less people, there's less heat, less traffic, and therefore, the traffic moves more seamlessly. People get to where they're needing to go to quicker, and it saves fuel as well, right? It's also better for the environment, at least theoretically. And if we get, say, 20 to 30% of people to work at night, especially if it suits them, if they're happy with it, and when it's cooler, when it's sometimes more peaceful, when it's more quiet, and again, to alleviate traffic. As you know, traffic lights run 24/7, so there'll be no difference to the traffic lights. And you could argue that this would actually work in some ways because, especially when you're in a country like my one, New Zealand, and you're trying to service people in other countries such as Australia or the United States or Europe, and they're working in a completely different time zone. Sometimes we find ourselves working at night or doing like a group meeting at night because it might be 10 o'clock at night our time, but to the people we're talking to, it is still 2 o'clock in the afternoon for them, for example. So it would actually, in some ways, make sense to actually work at night sometimes. And and again, just saying it would be easier, it would be cooler, it would be quieter, there'll be less traffic, and like I said, traffic lights will run 24/7. But the thing is, you would really have to weigh it up, especially if you want to also reduce emissions, like I was saying before. If there's less people working during the day, then there's less traffic during the day, and you save fuel and therefore cut down emissions that way. But if you have people working at night, yes, traffic lights run 24/7. I think that's the third time I've said that now, but obviously you would have people in offices with the lights on, and then again, a lot of offices seem to leave their lights on at night anyway, right? And sometimes you'll have just that one person or a couple of people who come back to the office at night to catch up on a bit of work or to get ahead of a bit of work. And even though there'll just be one or two people in a big office, they'll switch on that main switch, and all the lights in the office come on at the same time. You might have noticed that. I remember actually doing that when I worked in real estate. This was back in the sort of late 2000s. That was one of my first roles when I was in my early 20s back then. And I remember sometimes coming to the office at night, and you'd put on that main switch, and all the lights across the whole floor come on, and you're thinking, man, it's just me and you. And especially because of me, because I'm a proud environmentalist, and I am conscious of energy and efficiency and things like carbon emissions. And I think, man, all these lights on just for me is a bit of a waste, right? Should be an office full of 100 people here. So the point I'm making is that a lot of offices seem to leave their lights on at night anyway, but still you would have to weigh that up. I mean, obviously you wouldn't, if you implemented this idea where we get, say, 20 to 30% of people to work at night, you'd have to really do your due diligence to make sure that you don't increase emissions. Obviously, you don't want to do that. It would be great in terms of people working at night when it's cooler, when it's quieter, when there's less traffic on the road, getting to where they want to go, quicker, and therefore using less petrol and saving on cutting on emissions would be great for that. But you'd really have to weigh it up. Obviously, they'll need lights on in the buildings that they work in. You want to make sure that you don't actually end up increasing emissions overall. You'd really have to weigh it up, and it also depends on not just the power you use, but how that power is generated. Like, for example, I know here in New Zealand, I remember reading in an article that approximately 84% of our power comes from renewables. We have hydroelectric dams, we have wind farms and a bit of solar power too. So a lot of our power that we use actually comes from renewables. Obviously, that's good. But say if there's another country, for example, and they're generating a lot of their power, from coal or fossil fuels, which is coal, oil, and gas, and obviously that's not good. So you really have to weigh that up. But I do think it's a pretty good idea just to again alleviate the stress during the day. Some people can work at night when it's cooler, when it's more calm, where it's quieter, when there's less traffic, save time, save petrol, hopefully cut down on carbon emissions. Also time it well for if they had meetings with people on the other side of the world, so they're working at night. And if they're okay with that, that's good, and it suits the people who are on the other side of the world, who it's their for them it's their daytime. That's probably not a bad idea. Should some of us, not all of us, but should some of us actually work at night instead of during the day? I do think it's a very good idea, and I do think it deserves implementation, especially if it can work in a way that suits people and their timetables and saves them, time and petrol and money and cuts down on carbon emissions overall. If we can make that work, then I do think it's a very good idea overall. But hey, again, let me know your thoughts. Feel free to comment below. Should some of us, say 20 to 30% of us, work at night instead of during the day? Hey, up to you. I'm all ears. Thank you.